So, you're absolutely dying to find out a little bit more about the technical side of the Nikon ZR. Well, aren't you in luck, because we're going to get right into it with some nighttime testing. Now, this is a very interesting test actually, because we do want to verify, does the dual gain ISO actually work? Does the 6400 ISO actually activate when you put it in the camera instead of using red raw in post later? So first of all, here we have our 6400 ISO clip. That was originally 800 ISO, and then I boosted it to 6400 in post. As we can see, without any noise reduction, it is grainy as hell. It is probably recoverable, but it doesn't look good. If we instead use our 6400 base ISO shot in camera, it looks a lot cleaner. It's actually quite impressive how much cleaner it is. That solves that question that I had burning for a long time. Moving on. What we're looking at right here is some simple nighttime shots I did. 6400 base ISO, red raw. It was shot on a Tamron 28-75 f2.8 lens. It looks very clean. It's totally recoverable. I haven't done any post-processing. So effectively, we have no noise reduction going on, but yet it's a very clean image. And I do have to say, controversial opinion. First of all, you do lose one stop of dynamic range if you use the second base ISO, so the 6400, instead of 800. But compared to the Sony FX3, where you actually lose 1.5 to maybe 2 stops, most importantly, it's a little bit more of a usable ISO range. Now I get it. 12,800 ISO that the FX3 offers for its second base native dual ISO. That's a long word to say. It sounds great in practice, but when you're actually shooting anywhere, somewhere where there is any kind of light, you usually end up with too much light in the sensor and you have to use ND filters at night or step down the lens. It's really, really funny actually that you sometimes have to do that. So we're gonna do a small little exposure latitude test. Currently on the camera I have it heavily overexposed and Laura is looking really high key, really wedding-like, but maybe it's not a neutral exposure. If we try bringing this down, we can see that the outside is completely blown out. So let's start off by reducing the exposure by one step. All I did is I went from the shutter speed of 360 down to 180 degrees. Now the exposure is looking quite balanced for inside. I'm not using any artificial light, it's just simply natural light. But our outside is heavily overexposed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop down the lens by one stop. Now I'm slightly underexposed on Laura right here, but she's still looking beautiful as ever. However, we still have a little bit of overexposure on the outside, so I'm gonna step it down one more step. Now it's looking balanced on the outside, we're slightly underexposed on Laura. What I would do in this case is I would bring in some lights and bring up the exposure on Laura. But what we are gonna do is we're going to bring up her exposure in post and see how far we can stretch the R3D NE codec. Normally, I wouldn't be comfortable going any further than this. Let's say I have an edge case where I really have to use f16 or low shutter speed or whatever. So I'm going to reduce the exposure by one more stop by setting my shutter speed to 90 degrees. Now we're really underexposed. I would say 3 stops under the ideal exposure. And I'm fairly confident we can still recover this. However, let's push it a bit more. 45 degrees of exposure. The outside is looking beautiful. The inside is looking really dark and crammy. 22.5 degrees. Now Laura is basically gone. And I think we're about the limit of how far I can push it, but let's go one more stop. Now we're at 11 degrees of shutter speed, which means we are 6 stops under the optimal exposure. For me, this looks really bad, but I'm going to let Post Pontus take over and explain to you how far you can actually push this camera. Post Pontus here. So, in my really extensive testing, I can tell you up to around 3 stops of underexposure. You can still save it with some movie magic, but under that, the skin tones just disappear. Other details in a scene are perfectly capable of still sticking around. But if the actual people you are filming are underexposed, unfortunately, we really have to pull the brakes at 3 stops of underexposure. For general detail, around 6 stops is okay. We can even go as far as 8 stops, but we start really losing detail and we more get a gradient of different colors. Handheld shooting then. So, as you know, we do have a little bit of a rolling shutter, 9.3 milliseconds to be exact. And to test this out, I actually rigged up the Nikon ZR next to my red Komodo X using some simple magic arms. And I headed out and I filmed some really nice clips you're gonna look at right now. I do want to emphasize, I'm not using the same lenses on the two different cameras. I'm not using the same VNDs on those two lenses. And the angle was not 100% exact, not to even mention that the Komodo X is a Super 35 sensor, the Nikon ZR is a full frame sensor, which means I had to crop in a little bit, which does enable you some minor differences. Which one do you think is better?
Which one is better, not which one is which camera?
Which camera is better, yeah.
Looks like more range here. It looks like brighter. Yeah. But let's look at the shadows. It looks very magenta, this one. Yeah. I do feel like this could be the Nikon, actually.
Which one is the Nikon?
I don't know. It could be this one, because when I watched some stuff, it was more green tint. But I don't know. Like,
which one is the Nikon?
I'm not gonna tell you.
So that's why I have no clue.
But this one looks more green tint.
I like this one more.
And this one looks more magenta. This one looks more
soft.
More dark.
It has like this more softer look, like pro misty look than this one.
But probably if you grade them, like maybe there's more information in this one, but I don't know.
And as we can see, even if I whip by some cars pretty damn fast, you cannot really tell any artifacts in the Nikon ZR footage compared to the Komodo X. In the end, that just means if you have any qualms about the rolling shutter, you really shouldn't worry. It is more than good enough.
There's only magenta, there's no T-Mobile.
Whatever.
Are you
go with the dad jokes?
Are you pregnant?
Yeah. I always have a good dad joke.
Ah, look, but here I like this one more.
Well, how do you feel? You prefer the potato over the...
Well, I don't know if I would grade it, like what happens to the image. I would need to grade it to see. But this one looks like straight out of the camera, looks a bit cinematic because of this green tint.
Right, yeah.
Cinematic.
How the boys would say it.
And we're quickly moving on to the next subject. Let's test our different formats. So, we're shooting in R3D NE RAW. We're also shooting in ProRes RAW HQ. And finally, Nikon's RAW. In my testing, it hasn't really mattered what of these three formats you choose. And in my honestly quite extensive testing, when I've tried all three formats, they all perform very similarly. You can push them about as much. However, the ProRes RAW HQ data rate is quite freaking absurd. 1 terabyte you can fill up in roughly 20 minutes. So don't even use it, just stick to R3D or use Nikon RAW. Personally, I really like R3D because when I use it in combination with my Komodo X, I can get the picture to match perfectly, and I'm so happy about it. But if that isn't really important to you, then you can use Nikon RAW. And a bonus for Nikon RAW is that you sometimes can get another stop of dynamic range in the highlights, but you lose a stop in the shadows. That in its essence just means that you have to expose the R3D RAW and the Nikon RAW differently. With that out of the way, when it comes to the H.265 formats, when I tried using the 8-bit format, it was absolutely unbearably unusable. It's not really that bad, but the bitrate is not enough and the dynamic range is actually pushed down because there's not enough color information in the clip to be able to recover any highlights. With that said, credit is due where credit is due. As you can see in the clip here, the Nikon did actually tell me via Zebra that, hey buddy, you're actually clipping when you're using this format. And I was actually very impressed with that. With that said, H.265 10-bit is totally usable. I've seen a lot of information online about the H.265 being totally useless, absolutely unbearable. I cannot even, look, it's so... So basically what happened is when Nikon made this camera, they wanted the numbers to look really good. And they put in way too much noise reduction on the H.265 files. So it's even to the point where they start looking a little bit plasticky and you see some colors blending together. But all hope is not lost. First of all, Nikon can release a firmware update which will address this, something that they have said they will. So, looking at their past cameras, I think we can trust that. Secondly, I tried out the FX3 together with the Nikon ZR. Not in the same scenes, mind you. I'm sorry, I don't have both cameras with me right now. There is an upcoming video where I will be comparing these two cameras. It will be released next week. Anyway, I compared two files and I just upped the detail on the Nikon ZR and they were, to my eye, basically indiscernible. So don't worry too much, the H.265 is not really that bad as reviewers say. It's just, you have to find something to complain about. Granted, I have a lot of stuff to complain about with the Nikon ZR, but that is not today's video. No, right now we're gonna talk about the high-speed footage. If you want to shoot in 120 FPS, you can do it in any format you want. R2D, ProRes, NRAW, H.265, everything. But if you want to shoot in 240 FPS, 2K, you need to use... I know. You need to use the H.265 10-bit. But as I stated before, it's not really that bad, and the 240 FPS does look really good. I'm gonna tell you one final thing really quickly before we go. You can compare cameras online all day. You can watch all of my videos. You can watch everyone's video on the Nikon ZR. But that is not really going to save you, because I have to tell you, and it took me a long while to realize and maybe accept it. The camera makes quite a minor difference in the final image quality. The biggest difference really is the lighting and the lens. So I'm going to show you something. Ta-da! And what did I do? I turned off all of the lights pointing at me, making this image look a lot less flat. So even though I'm filming this on a lens for 4,000 euro, a camera for, is it 10,000 euro, and a bunch of extra equipment, the image looks as lifeless as I am when I wake up in the morning. That's my best tip to you. And my second best tip is the Nikon ZR is a lot better than you would expect for the small price tag. If you're considering picking one up, I would say go ahead, do it. It's a really good camera. Anyway, thank you for watching. I love you. Goodbye. Mwah.